Ladies and gentlemen, it's about that time. Draft analysts like Mel Kiper are starting to drop their big boards. Now, this did come out a few days ago, so I'm a little late, but who cares? I'm ready to react to it. Now, he did say that this is a lot of projecting, and his thoughts are subject to change the closer they get to the draft, but let's see what he has to say about it. Alright, so at number 1, it looks like he's got Caleb Williams, which I agree with. Probably like 85 to 90% of people will agree with. Caleb Williams is definitely maybe a high risk, high reward type of player, especially at the quarterback position. I think some people are overthinking the Caleb Williams evaluation. I do think that he hasn't yet proven that he's able to play within structure and thrive within structure, kind of like a guy like Drake May, who I'm sure we'll see soon, does to a really high level. But Caleb Williams has all the intangibles, all the traits you would look for in a quarterback. I know a lot of people compare him to Patrick Mahomes, at least they did to begin the season. A lot of those have died down, but I can see it. I mean, I don't think he'll be a Patrick Mahomes in the NFL, but I do think he has the arm talent, the improvisation skills to really succeed in the NFL. And as long as you surround him with talent around that offense, I think he can thrive in the NFL. He's my number 1. That's really all there is to be said. All right, moving on to Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 2. He is the best non-quarterback prospect in this draft. I don't think there's much argument at all around that. He's probably the best receiver prospect we've seen since a Jamar Chase, I'd probably say. He's really got no weaknesses. The only weaknesses I can really come up with Marvin Harrison is his ability after the catch. Like, he's not really going to make anyone miss, per se. But his body control up in the air, his route running is phenomenal. He gets that from his father, Marvin Harrison Sr. And yeah, he's really physical during the route. And, I mean, after the route, he's physical. He's just not really got loose hips enough to make a guy miss. But, again, I'm not really worried about that. If you're amazing at every other attribute besides that, I mean, you're a really good prospect in my opinion. No prospect's perfect coming out of college. Moving on to number 3, we got Drake May. The only really quarterback I see threatening Caleb Williams for that number 1 quarterback spot. To begin the season, I did say that the gap between Caleb Williams and Drake May isn't as far as a lot of people think it is, and I've kind of been proven right about that, but I also think that the hate for Caleb Williams is a little overblown. I do think Caleb Williams is better, undoubtedly, but Drake May is a close second, and I think he's going to be a franchise quarterback for whichever team takes him. At number 4, it looks like he's got Brock Bowers. Now, a lot of people like to compare him to a guy like Kyle Pitts coming out of Florida, and Brock Bowers isn't as good of a receiving prospect as Kyle Pitts was, but the reason that they compare him to being the best prospect since Kyle Pitts is because he's also a really good blocker. He's a little on the lighter side for a tight end, but he puts a lot of effort into blocking, and you can throw him in line and ask him to block all game if you really wanted to, but that's not what you draft Brock Bowers for. He is an amazing receiver. I know Alex from Hail Mary Sports likes to call him a weapon, not even a tight end, but just a weapon, and I agree with that. You're going to want him, running routes, getting the ball into his hands a lot more often than you're going to want him blocking, but he can block as well, and that's what makes him a really, really intriguing tight end prospect. Moving on to number 5, it looks like he's got Rome Odunze, which that makes him the second receiver. And I don't want to say I disagree with this, but 5 is definitely rich for me. And if you've watched my wide receiver rankings, you know that I am a bit lower on Rome Odunze than a lot of people. He's my 5th receiver so far. That can change, obviously, once the draft gets a little bit closer. But he is my 5th receiver so far, and having him 5 overall is a bit rich for me. But I think he's in that same tier as a Keon Coleman, Malik Neighbors, and I'm a really big fan of Troy Franklin, so I do have him in that tier as well. But I think that's the 4-group tier right there, is the Malik Neighbors, Keon Coleman, Rome Odunze, and Troy Franklin. I do think that Marvin Harrison is in a tier alone, and I don't think anyone's coming close to that tier in this class at least. So I do think that's a little bit high for Rome Odunze. Coming in at number 6, we got Shadur Sanders, the quarterback from Colorado, and I have a hard time getting this high on Shadur Sanders. For one, I do think he will return to Colorado. Nothing's set in stone. We've only really heard Deion Sanders say that he wants him to return, so I see why he has him on his big board. When I come up with my big board, I'm undecided if I'm actually going to have Shadur Sanders or a guy like Quinn Ewers on my big board, just because Quinn Ewers said that there's a 90% chance to return. Shadur Sanders, his dad saying he's going to return, so I don't know. But if I were to rank him on my big board, Shadur that is, I don't know if I can get at 6. Right now, off the top of my head, I would probably have Shadur as my 4th or 5th quarterback maybe on my power rankings, but yeah, I probably have guys like Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and even maybe Jaden Daniels ahead of Shadur, so I don't know about that one. Moving on to number 7, looks like he has Olu Fosu. This is the first offensive tackle on his big board, and I agree with that. I would probably have him a little bit higher on my big board. He's one of maybe 3 blue chip prospects in this draft. I think whatever team drafts him, he's going to be their left tackle for the next 10 years. Just because tackles, at least if you're good, don't change teams. They usually get locked down for like 10, 15 years. And I can see Olu Fosu being that type of guy. He's right up there with some of my favorite offensive tackle prospects. The likes of Evan Neal. I was a big fan of Evan Neal, and as a Giants fan, I've learned to regret that. Also, guys like Penei Sewell, and I was really high on Ike Ekwonu too, but he's a little iffy as well. But he's definitely a bookend left tackle. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't succeed in the NFL. At number 8, it looks like we got Keon Coleman, and I like this. That is 3 receivers in the top 10. I don't know about that, but Keon Coleman, he's a really solid option at receiver. He's big, he's physical. He'd be that number 1 target on a team. I like to compare him a little bit to T. Higgins. They're both crazy contested catch type of guys, but Keon Coleman is a little bit more than just a contested catch guy. He's really athletic for his size too. And look, it says 6'4", 215 pounds. He moves like he's probably like 6'1", 190. Like, he can move, and that's why Florida State actually has him return punts. I don't think they have him returning kickoffs though, but like he's a really dynamic player, and he's really fun to watch. So if you haven't seen Keon Coleman yet, I suggest watching him. And another receiver in the top 10, and Malik Neighbors. Again, like I said, the tier kind of goes Keon Coleman, Malik Neighbors, Troy Franklin, and Rome Odunze. So I'm not mad at him having Keon Coleman over Malik Neighbors by 1. The only thing that I kind of disagree with is that this is now 4 receivers in the top 10, and I just think there's a lot more deserving players to be in this top 10. Has there been a defensive player yet? I don't think there has. Nope. And this is a very offensive-heavy draft, I will say that. But I do think a defensive player deserves to be in the top 10. We'll see who he has at 10. Here we go. Here's a defensive player in Laiatu Latu. Now, the talent's undeniable with Laiatu. The only question is his medical history. He was forced to medically retire back in Washington a few years ago. It was a neck problem, and he had a bit of a hard time getting medically cleared to begin with. And that's why he transferred from Washington to UCLA, because UCLA cleared him to play. And strictly on the field, this guy is a dominant pass rusher. Definitely the best pass rusher in the class. The thing is, though, a lot of teams might be kind of scared of drafting him, especially this high, just because of the medical concerns. I'm sure he's going to fail a sizable amount of teams' medicals, so it'll be interesting to see how his draft process goes. And if he checks out medically, I could see him going top 5 for sure. 11, Cooper DeJean. I'm a big fan of Cooper DeJean. He's really versatile. I mean, you can play him at outside corner, slot corner. You can even play him at safety. He's just a really instinctive player, which I love. I don't know if he has the chops to really be an outside corner, especially for maybe a man-heavy team, just because Iowa doesn't really ask him to do that. He's more of a zone corner. And I do project him to be more of a safety. I really like him at the safety position. If a team drafts him to be a safety, I think he could be a really, really good safety for a really, really long time. And he's also a white corner, which is, always interesting to see. Moving on to number 12, he has Joe Alt. This is a bit low for Joe Alt for me. I don't think the margin between Olu Fosu and Joe Alt is that big at all. I do have Olu Fosu a little bit higher than Joe Alt, but Joe Alt's a really, really good left tackle. Let's see what he says about him. 32 games. He rarely gets caught. Yeah, he's really just a really technically sound left tackle. Maybe not the strongest guy in the world, but if you want a nice technically sound left tackle, I think Joe Alt's your guy, especially if he does fall to like the 12th pick range. I think that's a steal. Moving on to number 13, we have Dallas Turner. Now, to begin the season, I was a bit lower on Dallas Turner. I just thought he was really raw and kind of just an athletic freak with no true trades or, pass rush moves. And he's kind of proven me wrong this season. He's had a decent season. He is a bit on the lighter side at 242 pounds, but he plays a lot stronger than that. So I'm fine with his weight. I'm sure he'll gain a few pounds by combine time as well, so we'll have to look at that. But he's really just a athletic freak. He still needs to work on his pass rush moves a bit, in my opinion. He is still a bit raw, but at number 13, I'm fine with it. That's about where I would probably have him. Moving on to number 14, and we have Troy Fautanu, the offensive lineman from Washington. Now, I'm not there with Troy Fautanu yet. I think a team in the back end of the first round drafts him, I'd be okay with that. But I think he's more around that 25 to 40 range, in my opinion. That's more of where I have him. So Mel Kiper looks to be a little bit higher on Troy Fautanu, which is fine. Number 15, Xavier Worthy. What is that, like 5 receivers in the top 15? I mean, it's a good receiver class, but I don't know about 5 in the top 15. That's a third of the players. And Xavier Worthy, I have multiple receivers ahead of him. Guys like Troy Franklin, even Xavier Legette, even his teammate A.D. Mitchell, I believe I had higher in my wide receiver rankings. So that's a bit rich for me. I think he needs to work on his hands a bit. He's improved last year. I know he was dealing with a hand injury, and that's maybe why he had the drop issues, but I still want to see a little bit more with his hand consistency, but all the speed's there. I mean, he's going to be a deep threat in the NFL, and a lot of teams like to draft really fast receivers in the first round, so I could see him sinking into the back end of the first round, but that's about as far as I can get with Xavier Worthy. I don't think he's going to be a mid-round type of guy, or a mid-first round type of guy, so I'm not sure about that one. Moving on to number 16, we got Kool-Aid McKinstry. Let me just say, one of the coolest names I've ever heard in the NFL draft. And a lot of people are a bit lower on Kool-Aid McKinstry, it seems. 16 is a good spot for him. I feel like he's a really athletic man type of corner. You could really just line him up and ask him to shut down the best receiver on the team, and I think he's capable of doing that. He's got pretty good ball skills as well. His anticipation is really, really good as well. I really like him. I think 16 is a good spot for him. Moving on, number 17, Tyler Guyton. I know I'm kind of in the same boat as Broshma. If you don't know Broshma, he's kind of like another draft head on YouTube, and I'm just not there with Tyler Guyton yet. I'm really not. He's more of a day 2 type of guy for me. 17 is a bit rich, and I know Mel Kiper is projecting a lot because it still is early in the process, but I don't know if I can get there with Tyler Guyton. Number 18, we got Kamari Lasser. Now, I just rewatched Kamari Lasser a couple of days ago, and I can see why he's got him at 18. Let's see what he says. He's emerged as a lockdown corner for the Bulldogs. Agreed. He's tough, aggressive, hard-nosed. I agree with that. Yeah, he hasn't allowed a single touchdown. Yeah, I mean, he's really just a lockdown corner. I'd like to see him gain a little bit of weight. He is on the smaller side at 6 foot 180, but as long as he gains some weight, I love the way he plays. Number 19, we got J.C. Latham. Latham is my third offensive tackle. I have him over a guy like Troy Fautanu. I was pretty low on J.C. Latham to begin the season, but he's really just improved a lot. He's just a big, massive guy at 6'6", 360. Let's see what he said. Yep, he's light on his feet. I do agree with that. He's tough. He's really just the definition of a hog molly. Moving on to number 20, we got Nate Wiggins. Big fan of Nate Wiggins. He is probably, depending on what you classify Cooper DeJean as, he's probably my cornerback 2. He's a really lengthy guy at 6'2", 185. Maybe, gain a little bit of weight, but the length is really good. His coverage and his instincts are really good as well. Moving on to 21, T'Vondre Sweat. Whoa. Okay, so for a lot of guys probably don't even know who T'Vondre Sweat is. He hasn't really gotten a lot of hype, at least this season. But if you look at that weight, 6'4", 362 pounds. This guy is massive. I thought of T'Vondre Sweat as a late day 2 guy, so somewhere in the 3rd round. So Mel Kiper having him at 21 makes me want to rewatch some T'Vondre Sweat, which I definitely will. Let's see what he says. He's improved this season. He's shown more than just a plugger, because that's what I kind of seen him as, just a big guy to get in the way during the run. He's put on excellent pass rush moves. I guess I'll have to see about that. He's quick for his size, which I do agree with. And yeah, he's able to just dominate offensive linemen with his size. So I have to rewatch T'Vondre Sweat. From what I've seen of him, I did think of him more of just a run stopper, a guy with just a lot of mass to get in the way in the run lanes and stuff like that. I didn't really see much pass rush ability from him, but I'll have to rewatch him and see what I think. Number 22, Emeka Egbuka. 22, I like it. He's my 6th receiver so far. I have questions on if he can succeed in the NFL on the outside. I know he's done it for Ohio State, but doing it in college compared to doing it in the NFL is a bit different. I think he's going to thrive in the slot, though, in the NFL. I think he could be a guy like a Cooper Kupp or a guy like that Justin Jefferson in the slot. Like, he has a lot of promise in the slot, but as we've seen, teams don't value slot players, at least slot receivers, as much as they do outside receivers. So I could see him falling in the draft, but I can see a team who does draft him being very satisfied with Emeka Egbuka. Moving on to 23, got Jah Newton. And now Jah Newton is my only interior defensive lineman that I could see being in the top 25, really in the first round in general. I'm not there with T'Vondre Sweat. I'm not there with Leonard Taylor either. Jah Newton, though, I think he could probably be a little bit higher than 23. I could probably see him being top 15. Moving on to number 24, we got Jordan Morgan, and I'm not quite there at 24 yet for Jordan Morgan. He's more of like a late first round, maybe sneaking into the first round, or an early day 2 type of guy. But he's a really consistent offensive tackle. He tore his ACL, so maybe some teams are iffy about that. But besides that, he's a really solid player. And then finishing off the top 25, we got Zack Zenter, the guard from Michigan. Now, I don't think there's any guard so far in this class that's worthy of a top 25 spot. So I'm sure he's doing a lot of projecting on Zack Zenter. I think a guy like Cedric Van Pran is a bit better than Zack Zenter. So if you're going to put an interior offensive lineman in the top 25, I think a guy like that is more worthy of that spot. Or a guy like Talise Fuaga. I mean, he plays tackle in college, but he definitely projects more as a offensive guard. Same with Graham Barton. All of these guys I would have over Zack Zenter. But I don't know. I could see Zack Zenter being probably 40 to 50 range for me. And that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of Mel Kiper's list and my thoughts and opinions. If you like the video, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out a lot. And as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.